Hello and welcome to another live demonstration. Today I want to do a demo using the FW mixed media paint markers. So what are these? They are empty markers which you fill with any medium of your choice. So I've had a play with Brusho, watercolour, these have watercolour in, just fill. And I'm going to be, for the demonstration, using the FW acrylic inks because they're really nice, strong colour, well pigmented, permanent once dry. So they're fun to work with, and being able to put them in the markers just adds a little bit more fun. So simply to fill up, you just found a pipette is probably a very useful tool because you can push it in and get down and the fluid doesn't get stuck at the top and create a bubble. The one thing I have had to be careful with is the ball bearings inside, especially if you're washing. So you tip the fluid out to clean, just make sure you've got a little container to drop the ball bearings in. They're great to be able to mix up the liquid inside. What you can also do is you can mix, and you can mix the same colour each time because they've got little markers on the side. So you could fill up with a yellow and then fill up with the red to whatever colour you want. But you know the formula, so you can mix that same colour again. Like I say, I've had different mediums in them. They're fairly easy to clean. Just make sure you take the nibs out, and they do come with spare nibs. So each unit, you have a set of 2 in the smaller sizes and a set of 1 there. You'll see here they have spare nibs for you to replace. So 2 markers, each with a nib, plus 2 nibs. So you've got plenty of working ability with those. Just pop back on, and I get confused. At first when I did it, you unscrew the top to take out the workings to fill, and then you just pop the lid off to expose the nib, and then just activate the medium, pump the nib to allow it to run down, and off you go. So different types of nib, from the very fine, here I don't know if you can see it, to a chiselled, to a round, and there is a hard plastic nib as well, which I've got on one of my pens. This one I cleaned earlier, and it looks like there's a very pale yellow in there. It's just dirty. I started off with a blue colour, and then I cleaned it out. I then put yellow in because I was trying to see if how well they cleaned. You'll see here on the nib that it's got the blue and the yellow mixed in. It may look contaminated, but it isn't, because this is just clean water in here, and you'll see all it's doing is bringing out the clean water. So like I say, you've got quite a long life with them. Even though it looks stained, they're perfectly suitable for the next colour. I can put any colour in, even a white, and it will not be contaminated because all that's coming out is water. So again, another long life with those. Let's just have a look at some of the nibs. I'm not sure. This is a fibre nib. That's got watercolour in. I can see that from the colours. So great, you know when you do a watercolour, and if you put other mediums in, it becomes mixed media, but you want to traditionally keep watercolour, well, why not create watercolours but have different marks? So you can see here I'm creating marks, and this is still a watercolour. It doesn't matter what tool I'm using to apply it, I'm applying watercolour. So just think of all those little marks. Maybe you have difficulty getting some control in grasses or shapes. Look what you can do. You can create a watercolour painting but with a marker. I'm just going to see, because some of the colours, here's a chiselled end. This has got F&W ink inside. I'm not sure what this, again, another chisel. Just need to activate. I'm trying to find you a really fine one. I think it's possibly the white. I often have, this is the plastic chisel one. So again, I filled it with the F&W ink, but it's got quite a nice point to it and quite a solid nib, which is really nice, especially for, you can see there, going over areas or adding detail. Let me see if it's the yellow one. Yes, this yellow one, I'm not sure you're going to see, but it has a really fine nib. I'll give it a shake just to bring some of the colour down. There we go. I think this has got watercolour in as well. I can see, but you can see there how fine colours you can have. So I'm painting in watercolour, but I've got so much control. You know, there's really fine details on flowers. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll get on with the demonstration. So I've just drawn out 3 of the puffins from the original image. I quite like this little group. I do like, Gary mentioned earlier, the ninja one in the background. That was quite fun. But I've just concentrated on these 3. So it's just as simple, because you have control, it's very much the same as using a pen, but in the media of your choice. So I'm using acrylic ink. So this is an acrylic ink painting, or drawing, or demo, whatever you want to call it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be creative with my mark making. I'm going to use the tool I'm using and just have fun with it. It makes scrapey shapes, and I think that's a lot of fun. I don't want everything blocky for this. Just want to give you the impression of the bird. So I think this is very black on the background. Just activate some colour. But I don't want a solid unit, which is great with this flat nib. Go around. And you can see how controlled I can be, which is really nice. It's just a nice and different way of working. It's a new way of working, a different way. And maybe this will be the way that you actually find is the way you enjoy working. I do find people start with a watercolour or acrylic, which is not a bad thing, but it may not be their instinctive medium. You may find it could be pencil, it could be something very different. And that's why I always advise people to try. Don't mean you have to produce brilliant pictures with each media, but just try it and see its potential. You may find that actually I'm an oil painter and not a watercolourist. My brain works in an oil painterly way. And I do see people often struggling with going, oh, I can't do it, I can't work with it. It may just not be the right media, not that you can't actually do it. So there I'm leaving gaps. I just want it to be a little bit more sketchily, which I think's fun because I'm working with an acrylic. So it's an acrylic painting, but it's going to have marks that you don't get if I'm using a brush. Or I'm using more traditional, less, not the fluid acrylics. Okay. And you can see it is also changing the consistency of the black. It's getting lighter and darker, which is great because I'm not having to actually think about tones and value. It's kind of doing it itself. Okay. I think he has. Look at those marks there from just using the brush. They're wonderful. And harder to do if I was using a brush. So each tool you use is going to create different marks, and you can mix and match and choose what you're going to do. So just fairly simple, one colour. Let me just put some white on. Got a bit blobby at first, not too bothered. What I'm going to try and do is I'm trying to mix, while it's still wet, just some of the under areas by adding some of the black or some of the Payne's grey I think I've put in, because I want to just give that shape. I'll use the paper, the whiteness of the paper, which is always a useful thing to do. If you've got white there, why am I going to create any other colour? It's already there. Let's just see if this works. I'm just going to add a little bit into the wet colour. Oh yes, that's bleeding quite nicely. I don't want a strong colour, and I can go back in, but because it was wet, just give me a bit more tonal value. Okay. I'm going to need some. If that gets a bit too harsh, I'll just go back into it with some white. I'm using a watercolour paper because I just wanted the strength of the paper, and I quite like the texture, so I often use watercolour paper because it has a nice texture which just adds a little bit more to the work. Like I say here, brush marks. And again, I'm just using the tool I've got and creating these marks. So you see there, I've got a bit contaminated with the white, but that's easily solved and fixed because I just pump some more colour through and I'm getting the true colour again. So you can see how nice it is to mix on the page. Yeah, these are a bit dark. I'll let that dry and I can go back into it and just tone it down again. I just like some of that blue. I know a lot of people say you shouldn't use just black, you should mix your own, but if it's there, it's available, why not use it? Have fun, try and see what it does. I'm just adding a little bit of blue now into the black just to alter the tone a little bit, just make it a little bit more less solid, less black. Bit of blue. And you can hardly see it, but it's enough just to tone it down. Okay, so what should I do now? I'm going to do the beak. I think this is why I left this one empty. I was going to show you how to fill. Now this is where I cannot tell you how many of these have rolled away, so I begin to be quite careful with them. So to fill is really good because you can use the dropper, already in the bottle. Push it down and let it drop down. If this is not working as well, it will do, because I know it will. This is a nice strong colour. And I may mix some yellow into this because this is a bit harsh. Don't know if you can see it there. There you go. So I can see how much I've put in there. I know I don't need a lot, but I want a much more orange colour. So I'm just going to tone it down and add a little bit of yellow. There you go. Probably a little bit more because the red is quite a strong colour. So just drop it down. I can see it raising up here. Like I say, I often use a pipette for this. Okay, let me just check. What I'm going to do now is just check that I have the right colour. So shake well to mix the colours. Just give it a little activate. Okay, you can see it coming down. Again, I think that's probably still a bit too red. So I can put a little bit more yellow in. This stage can be a little bit messy, but if you think about it beforehand and you have all the colours that you want prepared, like I did, except I didn't do this colour because I wanted to show you, you just can go ahead and paint. So I want a bit more yellow. I want quite an orange colour. So you can mix your own colours. I think that should be fine. Lid's on in the pot because I know with me it's going to go everywhere. Put the top on. I'm going to shake, so I'm just going to put the lid on. Only because I did it the other day and I forgot to put the lid on and it went everywhere. So this is why I'm being really careful. Just activate again. And you can see there how easy it is to create a colour. So just going to put the red on. In the areas. Now this, again, it's probably a bit too red, but sometimes it's nice to change your colours and mix them up a bit and create a much stronger colour. Okay, that's fine. Might use some of this just to tone it down, and you can see, again, just want to activate. I should really have a little swatch of paper next to me, which I often do, just so you can use the side and you can activate your colours and you can see which colours you're working on, but this will do. So just add in a bit of yellow into the red just to make it a little bit more orange, a bit closer to the original colour. Might not have a huge amount of yellow in there, but I can see it working. Don't know if you can. And while I've got the yellow out, I'm just going to add the yellow bit here and here. Try and pick up some of the red as well. So you can see how I can use the nib just to pick up a bit of the colour. And here. Just, there we go. I do love puffin beaks, I think they're amazing. They have kind of brown eyes under here, so I'm just going to pick up some of the yellow and the red. Don't think you can see the rest of the eyes. Okay, done. So you can see that was quite a fine nib. And again, if it's contaminated, I just use another piece of paper to decontaminate. Onto the beak, back in with the blue I used earlier, and I'm not making solid shapes. You can see it's a representation of a puffin. You can see it looks like a puffin. The beak, the face, the body, it's in the right place. I could probably do these pink and green, it doesn't really matter. You've got the shape, the shape is there. Eye. A bit. I just like the feel of a pen. So here, just looks a bit odd because it's all very even. So I'm just going to break this up with my white, which is actually a little contaminated with the red, but don't matter. Use the side. even though I say it's a representation, there's still some details which I think are worth thinking about. Here it looks like he's got clown face. So all I'm going to do is just tone that down a little bit. Needs shading to bring up the shape of the face, but it was probably a little too harsh. Okay, same here. Toning that down a bit. Yeah. I'm not going to work on those anymore because I think they're quite, they're pretty much done. I may go back to them, which is why I'm working away from them now. I'm just going to concentrate on the background. You can't see their feet, and you can see this has got a nice chisel, and I mix some green, and I can use the edge and the side just to build up a background, or foreground in this case. I can change direction. Make a solid line round if I want to. This one. You notice I centered my image down a bit. I tend to either work offset or in an odd place. So normally I should have put it in the middle, but I tend to see things differently, and I just tend to offset them a bit. It's easy enough to take that back. I just put a mount round. Not using the whole of the page, not filling out all of the background. For me, I don't think it always needs it, but that's just me. Doesn't mean it's right, it's wrong, it works. Just thinking about how to make this work as a whole unit. The green's coming through a bit more now. You can see there how you get different tones just using the pen. I think it may be a little wet still here. I'm picking up some of the white. Okay, just going to add. Some yellow, let it run through. Actually, I've got a huge amount of yellow in there. So I can use them for texture as well. You can see there, I'm just letting it run through, and it's spreading on the still wet, damp surface. That makes really nice effects. A little bit of darkness. Just make sure it grounds the birds. And I've not thought about it. I've not drawn every individual leaf, just using the pens to do the work. Like I said, I shook it the other day without the lid on and it went everywhere. So I was covered in yellow. But you learn. Just making sure the background touches the birds so they're not have a halo around them. And I think that's quite successful. So the FW mixed media markers, put them in whichever media you like and see how they work. So I hope you enjoyed that little demonstration. Join us later in the week for a workshop and live demonstration with Sue Williams.